Alright guys, it's reassembly time. Take your valve body, put your felt in there. You want to make sure to push it down with something, make sure it goes in that little recess that it's supposed to fit in. Now if you're rebuilding an original, there should be a little mesh screen that goes in next. And then this washer will go on top of that. Okay, now you put your piercing pin in and spring. You might get lucky and land it. If not, just flip it over and just fiddle with it until you get it to go right through the middle. Put that ring in there and lay everything down nice. Now this guy goes into here. One thing I'm not covering, guys, is where to put grease or any kind of pellet gun oil or anything like that. So check your manual and make sure that you put that where you think it needs to go, where the instructions tell you to put it. Okay, now my valve assembly is assembled, but notice I'm not going to tighten it up. I'm going to leave it loose because when we insert it back into the tube, if it's tight, this O-ring will expand and it'll be extremely difficult to push in there. So leave this loose for now. And that guy, and this comes later. Next thing we're going to do is insert this piece. You can insert it from the front or the back, and it's going to land right here, this hole towards the rear, towards this, next to this slot. The next hole up is actually going to be where your valve assembly will be screwed in place. There's a small threaded hole and a large threaded hole. The larger diameter threaded hole goes towards the bottom. So I'll get that close to being in place, and then I'll take some type of tool and line up my threads gently, try not to bugger them up. And now I'll put my anchor piece back in. Now I had to take this loose in the vise, so I'm going to tighten it back up again in the vise. And basically I just get a piece of leather, wrap it around here, clamp down the vise, and then tighten that up. Another way you could do it is if you had the right size nuts, you could thread a nut on here, crank down, or two against each other, crank down on the two to sandwich them, and then you can use that to tighten it up, then take them loose again. But I'm going to tighten this up and I'll be right back. With this post tight, I can put in my valve assembly. Transfer port goes up, threaded portion goes down. And don't get overly panicked if you get it all the way in there and it's not lined up, because you still can twist it once it's in place. Okay, just like that. And now I'll take this screw, this almost flat-topped screw, which is a recessed one, and put it back in. One thing you'll notice about this screw is that it's recessed into a hole, so it doesn't clamp, it doesn't sandwich this tube and your valve assembly. It doesn't grab them and all clamp them together. It just holds it from spinning. And since it's holding it from spinning, I will go in here with my special tool and tighten down my valve. And as you tighten that valve, you're expanding that O-ring against the sidewalls. So you want that good and snug. Not enough to, like I said, not enough to damage it, just enough to have it good and snug. Alright, now your hammer assembly has two holes in it. Okay, remember this square and this round? It's going to end up like that. So once this is ready to go, oh, and by the way, those holes point up. So as soon as you get to this forward slot, put that round one in, and then as soon as you get to this rear one, put that square one, and that way you don't, it doesn't rotate on you. If you're replacing your transfer port O-ring, you can put that in place. Now your bolt can go in, and make sure your transfer port hole is pointed down. So this next part can be a little tricky. What you need to do is push your bolt all the way forward. Okay, so here's a bolt in here, you can see it. Push it, not all the way forward, but almost. So see how I have this front portion with this, where you can see the threads down in here? It's almost to the front. The front of the bolt has this big void space. Okay, this round portion, this round plug, goes in this front one. This square goes in where the threads are. But there's spring tension here. Remember when we took it apart, it thunk, it came apart. So what I'm going to do is line up that front one. And I don't want to turn it upside down. I know it's going to be hard for you guys to see, but line up the front one. The back one isn't going to fit. You can see kind of everything moving around in there. Okay, now I can put my finger in the back and until it snaps down, okay? So you may have to fiddle with that a little bit and go back and forth until everything lines up. Right now your hammer's free floating, so it's your bolt can move forward and back pretty easily. Once that's in place, you want to basically push your breech forward until your hole lines up. Now, I just noticed that my transfer port O-ring has come out. So I'm going to start over again. Actually, let's see if I can cheat. No, couldn't cheat. Oh well. I'll start over again and get this transfer port O-ring back in place. Okay, now push your bolt back. Line up the rear of the tubes, holding everything in place. And you want to push it back a little farther until you can see right in here. And actually there's a lock washer in there that never came out when I disassembled this. So the little lock washer is in there already. And this is going to hold everything together once you get this started. Alright, now that that's all together, I can worry a little bit less. So next piece I'm going to put on is my barrel band. I remember that was somewhere close to the front. I didn't take a measurement. And then put my barrel in. If you've got an old barrel band on here, you're putting a lot of strain under it, putting this barrel in. So until you meet up back here, you want to be very careful with it. This divot right here has to line up with the set screw hole. And this is one last chance to double check and make sure that your breech bolt screw is tight. Alright, with a little gentle coaxing, I was able to set that all the way back in place. Back in place means two things. You look down through the set screw hole and that divot is lined up. Another way to tell is everything should be lined up here. Okay, like someone came in with a saw or a grinder and just boink and just cut. It should all line up nicely. Now we'll put our set screw back in place. What's next? Looks like the bolt is next. Same thing with the Allen key. And I gotta find the hole. There it is. Put this divot towards the back. Once you get that set, you should be able to feel a little spring tension to check and make sure everything's working properly. Feel a little bit of spring tension when you push that forward. Okay. Now the safety comes next. The safety was a little tricky. Okay, and if you forget which way this goes, like I did the first time I put it together, there's a little S engraved in the gun right here. And that should have this slot, S for safety, should be right there. So now you need to take the little ball and that little spring The spring's not that bad. It should fall into place. Once you get it down in there, just lightly push it, make sure it's all the way down. And now the ball, if you're lucky, you can just drop it right on top of the spring. If you're not, you may have to get a tool, you may have to fiddle with it for a little while until you get it. Alright, just dropped it on place, so that's how that looks. Little ball on top of spring. Okay, now the plate side of your safety goes against there, so we're going to drop that down. Oh, you can see the indents here on the bottom. And that's where that ball ends up landing. So I'm going to put that in, and then I'm going to push it down. I'm going to push that spring pressure down. Then I'm going to insert it into the back end of the rifle. Once it's in the rifle, you don't have to worry so much about that spring and ball. Everything's going to be held in place, just like that. If you find it's trying to come out, then just move your bolt forward. It should move forward without any trouble. Now, two other pieces have to go on: your sight and your trigger assembly. So I'm going to put my trigger assembly on like that, and then I'm going to start this screw. Just put it through the hole, and that will keep everything in place back here. But don't push it too far because it has to thread into the bottom of your sight. So your sight goes on. Push your screw up and start it. Guys, if you're putting this together and something doesn't feel right, double check everything. So what happened was I installed this and I didn't take it off of safe. And basically I was jamming this trigger up against there. So the trigger is a little bent anyway, so I may take this back apart, but that's what happens. So if something just doesn't jive, doesn't feel right, stop. Back up a few steps and make sure that you're doing it right. Alright, now I can find where the stock goes on. Put the nut in place. Now what's not happy right up here is my barrel band is in the wrong place. So, like I said, something didn't feel right. We'll just back up a little bit. And we'll get that barrel band put where it needs to be. Alright, got my barrel band in place. You can see there's a little indent in the stock here. Barrel band is in place. Go ahead and tighten my stock down. And now I'm ready for pressure test. If I want to do that, I can do it, or I can put on my front sight and load up the gun, put the cap on and some CO2s in there, and get to shooting. One last thing, guys, it's easy to forget this barrel band screw. So just one last note to remember to tighten that guy down. Well guys, I hope you found this video useful in a successful rebuild on your Crosman 160. One more thing to note is I didn't go over where to oil the rifle or which components to put grease on. So use your best judgment, download an instruction manual that'll tell you where to put that oil, that grease, and happy shooting.